Councilmember Farmer, Councilmember McCutcheon, Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Galani,
Here.
and Chair Bartoni.
Here. Okay, so next up is approval of minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Made by Councilmember Flasher. Seconded by Councilmember Galani. Is there any discussion on the motion or on the minutes? If not, I will ask all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
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 Is there any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain. I watched it online, but I'll abstain anyway.
Okay, that's Councilmember Flasher is abstaining, Gary. Next on the agenda, we have public input. Travis, do we have anybody? I know we have some participants out there. Is there anybody looking to participate in the public participation?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have a few in attendance. Ms. Fisher has raised her hand, so I'll let her in first. Before I get to, I'll just give a quick instruction if anyone would like to address the committee. Use the raise hand feature, put it in the chat, and we'll let you in. Here comes Ms. Fisher.
Hi, all. Thank you for letting me join tonight. I know you're shocked that I have something to say. I won't take much of your time tonight because, as you know, Mr. Vunich is going to give you all an update on the fish farm sound testing that took place last week. He was also kind enough to spend some time with me on the phone yesterday, as I wanted to make sure I was thinking straight on a few timeline issues regarding the testing. On a really positive note, Mr. Vunich shared that he and Mr. Thunder were able to see firsthand that all the motors had been changed. So we were very grateful for that, as that had been a big concern of ours. But as you know, and you know there's always a but, unfortunately, only 3 of the 6 motors were running for the test, and that is still concerning to us. Apparently, 3 of the motors were quite clogged with algae to the point they were not functioning. Given that everyone knew earlier this year, I think back maybe in February or March, that the testing was forthcoming, our hope was that Mr. Lisk would have had all the motors running and in top shape. After all, this is certainly in his best interest as well as ours. Even though we know that the test can be extrapolated out to account for half of the motors not running for the test, we really don't know if the other 3 motors are from the same batch, will perform the same, etc. But I'll let our sound expert on the committee talk to that either at this meeting or the next meeting when the test results are in. Also, another slight concern is that apparently the 3 pens where the motors were running did not have many fish in them. I don't have any idea what effect a full pen versus a less than full pen would have on the motors, if any, and subsequently the testing. Again, perhaps this is something either Mr. Thunder will address in the results or our resident sound expert, Teresa, could comment on. We remain cautiously optimistic that this unfortunate period might soon be behind us, and we'll be anxiously awaiting the new test results. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher, as always. Travis, do we have any others?
Yes, sir. We do have, I believe, one other raised hand.
Okay, it looks like, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. Mr. Gulas is next.
Yes, Gulas is fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chuck Gulas and Gil Smith here, 2054 Wild Horse Creek Road. We won't take up much of your time. We concur with what Nancy said. We were happy to cooperate with Mr. Thunder on the testing. And again, we are very saddened at the fact that not all 6 of the motors were available to him for the testing. And we hope that doesn't invalidate the results. But we look forward to the report coming in the future. and we want to thank you for your time and attention to this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it as always. Travis, I don't see any other hands up, but is there anybody else out there that wants to speak?
No, sir, I do not believe so.
Okay, well, we will close the public input then. Move on to action items. From my count, we have 2 under planning matters. We have 6 under park matters. First one is regarding the zoning ordinance for the noise code, which we just had a couple speakers on. So Joe, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, before the department gives a brief presentation of the testing that occurred last week, it does want to thank Dr. Gulas and Mr. Smith for allowing Steve Thunder to access the property and to place sound monitoring equipment upon it. Obviously, without their cooperation, it would have been a lot more difficult. So I do not want to let that opportunity pass without saying thank you to them. I also want to thank Mr. Lisk. He did allow full access to his property for Steve Thunder and I. We weren't encumbered by any request. We were able to freely move about the dock and pen area and do our observations. And then also something that wasn't included in the memorandum, a sound test on the property again, like was done previously when Steve Thunder visited Wildwood. So my thanks to everybody for their cooperation. As has been mentioned, the testing did occur the week of June 7th. Steve Thunder, Dr. Thunder's son, came to town on Monday, set up the equipment for much of Monday afternoon. And there were 2 locations. One, I've mentioned the property line between the Lisk aquaculture operation and Dr. Gulas and Mr. Smith's property. Also, a second location was chosen to determine the ambient nighttime level of noise. And that was the water tower that is located on Wild Horse Creek Road, just north of Foul Zone Lane. And so those 2 were the locations. I do want to mention that while we were visiting the property, Steve Thunder asked Mr. Lisk if we could do a test. Mr. Lisk said yes. So we'll have information from the site on that Wednesday, June 9th. Just to summarize, I expect to have the report sometime probably by the end of June, early July. It'll be an agenda item at the July committee meeting. But as I say, I have nothing to report yet. Mr. Thunder did not give any inclinations or inklings of what he heard or what he saw. As soon as I get the report, we'll be glad to get it to everybody and anybody. Just to summarize, the testing occurred between June 7th and June 9th. We had full access to the property. Both Steve Thunder and I visually inspected all of the motors or the aerators, and they are all the new type. So all of the old ones have been replaced. Much of the old equipment was on the dock still. So we were able to not only verify the new equipment, but see the old equipment in its kind of disassembled form. Again, we were able to do testing on the site, which was a bonus from my particular perspective. A couple of things I do want to mention is that the discrete tone, that whining noise that has always been the problem from day one, even though our noise and sound testing had indicated the decibel level wasn't being exceeded at the property line, that whining noise was always a problem. Standing next to the 3 operating motors, did not hear it. Both Steve Thunder commented on it and I can comment on it as well. Secondly, Miss Fisher mentioned several of the pens did not appear to have any fish, and some of the pens, the ones that were operational, didn't seem to have full capacity as I've seen in the past. I'm not sure what that means, but I will talk with Steve Thunder to make sure that if there is anything that would impact testing or might impact the motors, I'll certainly ask him to investigate. And finally, as is mentioned, 3 of the motors were not operational. Steve Thunder, our consultant, didn't seem to think that would impact the results of the testing. They're very confident in their modeling. They're very confident in the math that kind of drives or sets the parameters for sound and noise. And so, although all of us wished all 6 were operational, they weren't. But I hope we'll all wait to get the test results and hear from the Thunders when they participated in the July meeting to see what it all means. Mr. Chair, thanks for the attention of the committee and yourself, and I'm available for any questions or comments. Thank you.
So thank you, Joe. And before I get to the committee members for any questions, are you looking for any action tonight, or do you want to wait until we get the test results?
No action is requested tonight, but I expect at the July meeting, we'll be in a position hopefully to maybe take you up on that offer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions for the department? Okay, we've got Council Member Clark. Go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, Mr. Vonich, of course, you know my concern with this, and just for the record, because the neighbors have, talked with me about it, and I still would prefer that we have all of the motors running. There could be, coming from manufacturing myself, there's many things that can happen, and things that you would not expect at all. And, you could have damaged parts, bad materials it's made out of, bent pieces, transportation issues. There's a long list. Of course, we know that things can happen, and there's a lot of variables involved. I would also like to have it done because it seems like we're focused on testing these aerators, and 3 of them now are not functioning. And as I think it was Nancy said, that they were reported to be clogged with algae. So after they have been cleaned, I don't know, if some damage has been done to that either, but I feel like we're testing the motors instead of testing the noise level at that location. And that, in my mind, is a completely different test. So I still would like it if we had all of those motors running and we tested at that location to just verify that the motors, when all functioning, are not giving any discrete tones or other tones that are above the limit. So we don't have to come back and readdress this later. And also, I'm a little concerned if the 3 are not running after we were told that all of the aerators needed to be running full time all the time. Does that mean that the fish are in danger of not having enough oxygen and possibly some dying and having a smell there or something, another problem in the future? That's it.
Thank you, Teresa.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
I certainly appreciate Councilmember Clark's concern about the 6 operational motors or aerators. And again, I emphasize that to Steve Thunder. I hope that when Dr. Thunder and Steve Thunder are part of our discussion, they can explain it much better than I. But I certainly will pass on your concerns, Ms. Clark, to them.
Well, just to follow up, yeah, and let them know that I understand that. I understand their modeling, their theoretical, that these machines are made not to have that discrete tone. I understand that. I just also understand that there could be loose screws, they could be assembled, and even down to which screw is screwed in first, second, third, fourth, whatever, can cause issues with noise. So I just would like to verify even above that discrete tone that we have going on.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Okay, thank you, everyone. And Gary, I'm sure you noticed, but Councilmember Farmer did join us. So I just want to make sure that we saw that. Next thing on our agenda is the Birch Forest Drive turnaround. So Joe, I'll let you have it from here.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, tonight the Department of Planning is presenting to you the final package for the proposed Birch Forest Drive turnaround, pardon me. In that package of information is the plat that was previously approved by City Council. Nothing on the plat has changed, but I think it's informative to include with the construction drawings as well as the cost estimate. Also, as mentioned, the construction drawings are part of the overall packet that's attached to the memorandum, and then the cost estimate. Tonight, simply the department is presenting it to the committee to see if there are any comments or questions. And if there is not, the department would respectfully request that the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning and Parks be authorized to proceed forward with the bidding process. If there are any questions or comments, the department would be glad to try to address them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe? Dr. Rambo?
Yeah, just real quickly, Joe, you may have said this 6 times and I just don't recall, but was there a reason why that street wasn't just put through instead of doing a turnaround and then a cul-de-sac?
Yes, sir. There were concerns expressed by the residents that lived on the older portion of Birch Forest Drive about the extension of the Stub Street, the impact it would have on their neighborhood, certainly with increased traffic, et cetera. And that was also echoed by others in the, not only on Birch Forest Drive, but some on Forest Leaf Parkway, et cetera. Their concern is that traffic already was what they considered substantial, and they'd like to direct as much of it to the Otherton Road extension and either out to Route 109 or Route 100. And so the department supported not extending the Stub Street, first time it had ever done that, and the City Council concurred. And so what we're trying to do here is to remove what I would consider 2 ugly asphalt temporary turnarounds that impact 3 of the lots at the end of the Stub Street, but also provide a pedestrian access and emergency access for EMS, fire, and police. Thank you.
So the council decided to spend the extra money to do this based on resident complaints, and it was too late to go to the construction company or the developer of the newer area to make them pay some of the freight. That's kind of the bottom line.
Well, kind of, but in the ordinance governing the villages at Brightleaf, there is a prohibition against the extension of the Stub Street. So it would have required an amendment to the ordinance, which would be a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and then action by City Council. And quite frankly, Dr. Rambo, we would have reneged on a promise we made to the property owners.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you.
If we don't have any more questions, I'll just make a motion that we send this out to bid, however you want to word that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to accept the department's recommendation. We have a second from Councilmember Farmer. Is there any questions regarding the motion or any other questions for Joe? Okay, so Joe, I do have a couple questions myself. So to get an idea of what, looking at the material that you provided, to get an idea of what this, like the finished product, so to speak, will be, is like page 5, like a good page for me to look at? Or which would be the best page, I guess, also?
Well, from a kind of pretty perspective, I would say the landscape plan is probably the best from a aerial perspective. It shows you the, thank you, Mr. Newberry. It kind of shows you the
Yeah,
the T turnaround, that kind of hammerhead design. It also shows you the proposed retaining walls. But more importantly, I think it gives you a perspective of what we intend to do in terms of landscaping. And I think that's a good one. For a more engineering perspective, I think I would probably offer you sheet S1 of the construction drawings. And the reason I identified that, Mr. Chair, is that it shows the removal of the temporary asphalt turnarounds that have been in place since the late 1980s. And then also the pedestrian access in yellow, the T turnaround in the shade of gray, and then the retaining walls that are planned. So from an aerial perspective, those are the best. We didn't do necessarily a cross section or a slice through it so you could see vertical perspective, but for the most part, the elevation of the cul-de-sac that's in the villages at Brightleaf, the Farmer Stubb Street, that's Birch Forest Drive, and the new turnaround will all be at an equal elevation.
okay, thank you. And I think I had an understanding of this anyway, and thanks for clarifying where the sidewalk was. That's what I was thinking it was. But like, I've driven down here a couple times, and I know it's gonna look a lot prettier, but what I want to make sure we're not doing is building a small parking lot for the houses at the end of the street, because when I've gone by there now, it looks like it's just additional parking for the residents, which, you know, I mean, that'd be nice if you just, you know, lived at the end of a cul-de-sac and had additional parking, but, you know, most of the streets in our city don't have that. So, I mean, how will we make sure that that doesn't happen? I mean, can we, I mean, it's a public thing, so I don't know if we're gonna be able to put tickets on people's cars, but at the same time, from what I understand originally when this came up, you know, this is for all the delivery guys, make it easier for them to turn around and not for people just to be able to park their third or fourth car.
Very much so, because again, it's our emergency access, it's secondary emergency access. So it has to be unencumbered for the purposes of fire, EMS, and police. So we'll actually, given what you just said, and I've not seen that circumstance, we'll probably, if acceptable to city council when we get to this stage, post it for no parking.
Okay, I would almost want that to be part of, I mean, I know it's just putting a sign up, would be part of the plan moving forward, because if it's just going to be for additional parking, I would have, you know, some issues with this. So, but thanks for clarifying that.
And thanks for the suggestion, and we'll make sure it gets done.
Okay. Any other questions for Joe or anyone? Okay, all in favor of the motion to move forward, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. So moving on to park matters. The first item is the selection of a park design consultant for Bluff View Park. And Joe, I'll take it.
And thank you again, Mr. Chair, and to the chair and the members of the committee. I only have a few more, then you'll hear from somebody else for the remainder of the meeting, so bear with me. Mr. Chair, thank you again. And members of the committee, tonight the department is presenting to you the final package, so to speak, relative to the department's recommendation for a consultant for Bluff View Park. As you all may recall, at the May meeting, the department had provided you much of the same information that's available tonight in its June memorandum. And that was the identification of 10 potential firms that had submitted requests for qualifications, responses to a request for qualifications for another potential park project. And that was done very recently. And from those 10, the department had recommended TerraSpec. The recommendation, though, did not include the scope, the full scope of work and the cost estimate. Tonight, we do have the full scope of work from TerraSpec along with their proposed cost estimate. And as you can see, the cost estimate is at, $67,500. which is less than the budgeted amount that's available in the capital improvements program for this fiscal year. And as with all of proposals from TerraSpec, it includes the development of the engineering plan, bid specifications for the purposes of the bidding of the project. And importantly, it also does bid administration, and then finally, construction management and administration. So we get a full complement of services, which is very appreciated because of our small staff right at the moment with the Department of Planning and Parks. And so tonight, the department is recommending the scope of services, the cost estimate, and TerraSpec as the provider of those services for this particular project at Bluffview Park. Therefore, the department is respectfully requesting a motion to proceed forward and send the recommendation to City Council for consideration and potential legislation. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for the department? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Two quick ones. Joe, first of all, I know you guys have beat this to death already, but I'm curious as to why we chose cloth awnings, and because they fade, they don't last very long. They're kind of noisy sometimes, but it's a whole lot cheaper. Was that the sole rationale, or is it just an aesthetic thing and we just committed to replacing them as needed, or which is it?
I think it was more of a cost consideration, given that we have a grant from the Municipal Park Grant Commission to fund almost probably, I would describe as maybe 60 to 70% of the project. But we also wanted to be cautious with taxpayers' money, given the concerns about COVID-19.
Sure. Okay. The larger
Dr.
question though
Randall.
is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you like, one of the things we can do is we can do an add alternate and show some type of other shade structure material wise, and then have the cloth as the base bid, and then an add alternate to see what the cost might be or the cost difference.
I think it makes sense. I mean, I like the look of awnings, but they just, unless the technology has improved, they don't last that long. And so it would be good to have that. That's a great suggestion. But my bigger question was, I was over there with Councilmember Jaxie, and I love what they're doing. I love the separate paths, the path out to the overlook for pedestrians only. But my concern is, when we were there was, a bunch of kids on mountain bikes. I'm thrilled to see them there. They've got that park now, working on it. But they were being followed by a drone. Taken, because a GoPro camera on everybody's helmet wasn't enough. They needed to have aerial shots, right? It's noisy as hell, and it's going to ruin the ambiance of the overlook. And so my question really was, it's twofold. What can we do about drones in those areas where it's supposed to be contemplative and peaceful? And is there a plan for bike separation out there at the overlook? Because there are bike racks at the north and the south of the area, which is, great. It makes it more accessible, but there's going to be a whole lot more bikes whizzing by than some folks with walkers are wanting to deal with. So can you speak to that?
Certainly. That's a problem. I concur wholeheartedly. I think the bluff is an area where you want to basically have as much quiet or as possible, so you can have that reflective, contemplative place within the park. And certainly, I think we can address it through several design components as well as signage. Relatively speaking, appropriate signage and signage that doesn't impact the reflective and contemplative nature of the area as well. The other thing I will do is I will talk to Gateway Off-Road Cyclists. Many of the people that visit the park are affiliated with that organization, a great organization, but I think they just need to know this isn't anything goes. This is a city park. It's intended to accommodate a lot of different users, and those users all aren't on the same page regarding noise having drones and everything else involved. So we'll address it, and we'll address it as best we can. I promise you that.
Yeah, kids will be kids, and I love the idea that they're there. I love the idea that we slid aside to make room for them. I don't love the idea that they would tend to take over because, believe it or not, I was a young boy myself once, and I wasn't always as considerate as I should have been. So that's it. I'm ready to support this.
Any other questions for Joe? Teresa, go ahead.
No, I was just going to move that we move forward on this with Terraspect as the focus, and with adding in the alternate to show the different awnings possible. And do I need to add anything else to that, Joe?
Councilmember Clark, the concern about the drone use and the noise in certain areas of the park, I don't think it needs to be part of the motion. But from this point forward, when we bring back information to you, we'll address it as we do our step-by-step analysis.
Great.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? We have a second from Councilmember Rambo. Any discussion on the motion? So this doesn't necessarily go to the motion, Joe, but I want to say it was not too long ago, but now it might have been 3 or 4 years ago at least. But didn't we put an ordinance in place regarding drones? Was it for the whole city? Because I know the concern at the time was very residential, just don't want somebody peeking over somebody else's fence, but and taking pictures of children. But do you remember if that addressed like situations like Councilmember Rambo is discussing?
Well, Mr. Chair, you have a very good memory because we were one of the first municipalities in the metropolitan area to have regulations relative to drones. And yes, we focused more on the residential setting, but I do recall us talking about park properties. And the reason, not so much what Dr. Rambo just described, but we were concerned that people would take them there and basically do their training. And we'd have a lot of drones just wandering around the park with, let's say, first time or novice users. So what I'll do is I'll check into that, and I can send out to the committee what we have in the regulations relative to drones prior to the next meeting, so you can kind of look at it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, hopefully we already have something in place, and it's just a matter of getting out there and reminding people, or just a friendly awareness. So any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to move forward, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item under Parks Matters is the development of hardcourt system in the existing parks. This is wards 1 and 6. Joe, I'll let you have it.
Well, again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you know, the hardcourt issue has been forefront since the beginning of 2021. This committee has been leading the charge for consideration of such at one of our public park facilities. Assisting the Planning and Parks Committee has been the Administration and Public Works Committee, which actually discussed it and took a vote of endorsement for a hardcourt area in one of our park properties, and forwarded that recommendation to the Planning and Parks Committee, which discussed it at its May meeting. At the May meeting, there were 3 questions that were asked by the committee that they sought answers to. The first related to Community Park and the potential of using a portion of Community Park for a hardcourt system. The concern raised related to the charter requirement relative to any public project by the city that would exceed $3.59 million. Obviously, for Community Park, we have already exceeded that amount with our 3-phase development. The committee asked that Mr. Cross, our city administrator, and the department contact John Young, our city attorney, and see what he thought. And what Mr. Young has said is that with the passage of the revision to that charter requirement, it is not retroactively applied. And so from Mr. Young's perspective, which will be ultimately provided to you, I think, in the form of an opinion, we actually can use community park because retroactively, since the amendment to that particular provision of the charter hasn't been in place as long as we've been developing community park, we are under that amount. And so that's good news. We have an option here in community park. Secondly, there was a discussion relating to the design and development of a set of plans. And so the department in its memorandum here for the June meeting is respectfully requesting that it be able to basically pull together a list of potential providers of services to present to the committee in July. The reason I say that is I think hard court systems are a little different than what we typically see in terms of trails, playground equipment. I think there's just a little bit more of a technical aspect to it. So I would like to go out, formulate a list for you and the items that I think any consultant should respond to for the committee relative to this and present it to you at a future meeting. And funding. We are just a month or so away from our mid-year budget adjustment process. And I think that'll be an opportune time once we have an idea of cost to basically discuss it. So hopefully the department's answered all three questions. I think we're on the cusp of being able to move forward, both from a site location, community park, if that's the ultimate recommendation of the committee. I think we can start looking at who might be a good design consultant for us. And then finally, I think we can talk about funding very shortly here with our mid-year budget adjustment. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Joe. I see we got Councilmember Flasher, who's been very supportive of this. So go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, my first question is, do we know where exactly in Community Park we are kind of looking as a possible landing spot?
Mr. Flasher, I would argue, and that's not the term, I'm not trying to, but I would argue that we should maybe look toward the south end of the park near Route 100. The reason I say that is in the original master plan, we had actually showed an area there for the salt storage facility. It was controversial when it was included in the master plan. Ultimately, it was removed, and obviously we now have one down at the Kelp property on Manchester Road and Highway T. But we looked at the topography for that salt storage facility, and I think it can work to our benefit. Secondly, given the noise and potential lighting, I'd like to put it down toward Route 100 where we already have some noise, and basically not put a new noise generator somewhere up in the north end close to large lot single family, or on the east end close to Lafayette Trails and Windsor Crest. So I think we can use Route 100 to mask the sound, I guess is what I'm saying.
Great. Could I then, if there's a motion needed to kind of get the ball rolling with getting bids and things like that, I'd love to be the one making that motion for Community Park specifically, as opposed to Glencoe.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Nyan. So any discussion? Rob, I saw you got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, just I like the central location of Community Park. I love the idea that it might even be, the facility might even be visible from 100, so it shows more activity in the city and so forth. It just feels like the right spot. I was hoping to avoid the Great Meadow. Are you talking, Joe? Are you talking about there, that flat area that's a honeysuckle monoculture near the dog park? because
Yes.
that's 3 acres of crap. And we might as well kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And if it floods, it floods. It's an ideal situation. It's right there where things are concentrated. So I love the idea. I came into here until just now supporting the Grover idea, because I know where it would go there. And but yeah, so community park sounds like the right spot to me. So I'm enthusiastic about it.
Thank you. Tracy, go ahead.
I just have a question. When the estimates come in from the companies, I mean, we want to make it obviously as cost effective as possible. I mean, but I would like to see maybe, or maybe not now, but down the road, I don't know exactly what's down there at that exact location, some kind of shade, some kind of, I mean, we don't need another pavilion maybe for rental, or maybe we do. Maybe people want to have like rent the pavilion, use the pickleball courts, do something in conjunction. But if you're waiting for a court or if you're finishing, it's stinking hot out there sometimes. And it would be nice to have some sort of shade area in conjunction with the courts. Again, cost is obviously a concern, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, Ms. Nyan, we can certainly, again, put that on our wish list as we start the project. Each component of that wish list will have a unit cost and an overall cost. And so we'll be able to see if it's something we can afford or not, or if we really feel, as you've described, it's necessary, which I concur with, then we can look at what else we can maybe not put in the area right away to benefit having a nice shade structure where people can sit and wait.
Councilmember Rambo?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just real quickly. There's some nice shade trees there. And maybe we could leverage the shade trees and have something on the west and something on the east with circular bench or something, and just make it really appealing at a low cost. Because if it's raining, you're not playing tennis or pickleball, anyhow. And so that could be a good substitute. I just wanted everybody to keep that in mind when we go through this. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for Joe? So I think Tracy's got a good idea there. We have a family condo down at the lake, and they've turned one of the tennis courts into pickleball courts. But next to that is just a really small pavilion. It's got like probably 2 picnic benches, something like that, with just a small structure on top of it. But you do see people, they just kind of set up there. They got some snacks, and it's just like a place to put everything also. And seems like they take turns getting on and off also. So if we could do something at a modest expense to make the comfort level a little bit easier, that would be a good idea also. So if seeing no other questions, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you very much. So moving on to our next item under Parks Matters is Grand Tree Protection. This is regarding the pedestrian bridge in Ward 8. Joe, is this one for you also?
Yes, this is my last one, I promise.
All right, well, we're fine with it.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the Department of Planning has prepared for your consideration and tonight a memorandum relating the city's effort to save a grand tree that is slated to be removed as part of the pedestrian bridge project between the manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hills and the manors at the Enclaves. As was mentioned at the May meeting, when the pre-construction meeting was held with DJM Ecological Services, the park designer, and staff from the Department of Planning and Parks, it was clearly obvious this particular tree needed to be considered for preservation, and the actual design of the trail changed. To that end, the department contacted the park designer, asked the park designer to consult with arborists and others and develop a plan that would save the tree, allow the trail to be constructed to the location of the bridge, and still retain all accessible requirements relative to grade, both going onto the bridge and off the bridge. The park designer was able to come up with a plan The plan was submitted to DJM Ecological Services, the contractor that's been selected for the project. And lo and behold, they came back with an estimate in terms of cost. And that estimate was almost $60,000, which kind of took the park designer's breath and my breath away. The park designer, for the most part, spent much of yesterday checking that figure, basically going through an analysis to see if there was just a simple mistake or if there was something else to this. And quite frankly, the cost of boulders is substantial. It's basically about $95 a face. And a face is about a 1 by 1 square, 1 foot by 1 foot square. And from the perspective of our park designer, Ken Keitel, the estimate is pretty accurate. What I asked then was, there's got to be another approach. What about interlocking block? And that was presented to DJM Ecological Services. And they basically said, yes, it can be done. And it could be done at probably a third to a half of the cost. Also, to offset some of that cost, the contractor recommended that instead of using the plastic wood for the railings and balusters, that we go back to cedar, which was the base bid. And in conjunction with the interlocking block and the change in material for the railings and balusters, our park designer thinks we can get back to close to the original bid cost, which was about $101,000. And so it is an expense to save the tree. The department thinks it's a reasonable expense if we do some changes. Obviously, the quality of the material for the bridge construction is reduced from the plastic wood that we had to come, the composite material, to cedar. It will require more maintenance over the term of the bridge's existence. But I think Mr. Garitano and Dr. Rambo visited the property, looked at the tree, and I defer to them to tell you if it's worth the value or not. But tonight, I'd like to offer to the committee a request to allow for the redesign to occur with the interlocking block. And it's a specific kind. It's called Ready Rock. And no, excuse me, it's a different block. It's not the traditional smaller size. They're larger ones. They fit well. It'll add a little character. So I'd like to bring that all to you in July, and so that you could see the redesign with the new materials and see what you think. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Joe, do you need a motion to move forward with that? Is that what you're requesting?
I don't know if it's a motion, but if it would make the committee feel better, because we are going to incur some costs with the park designer. But again, he's been doing most of this without any charge to the city to date, because he really wants to save the tree as well. So I think, if you don't mind, probably a motion would be appreciated if we want to proceed forward with investigating the redesign with the new materials.
Okay. First hand was up was Councilmember Rambo. Go ahead, Rob.
Okay, and this is my last thing too. Sorry, guys. First of all, this was on Mr. Vunich's initiative, I believe, saving that tree. And I think it's great. You can't save all trees, and for 60 grand, I'd say cut it up and make a bench out of it. But for 20 grand, it is definitely worth saving, because it's an amenity for that whole area. And I'm thrilled we've got a plan. I came prepared to blame the cost of boulders for the bulk of the price, because it's broken down in the documentation. And I bought 300 tons of boulders when I built my house, so I know just exactly how pricey the damn things are. And this is a small step back aesthetically, but it's going to be great over time. So I'm thrilled about this project. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, was the plantings list is abysmal. The ornamental trees, there's a redbud cultivar. I don't mind, but the other trees are Japanese lilacs, which might give you a clue as to what my objection is. They're invasive in New York and places to the east. It's going to get worse down the road for us. And we're setting ourselves up for problems in a few years. But what's worse is the ground cover stuff. There's some liriope, which is an Asian, a wandering plant that covers everything. I've seen it spread under sidewalks, and I'm not even in the business. I've just noticed it casually. It will overwhelm that entire area. We may be dead, but it's still going to happen, and then you can't get rid of it. And even worse, the grasses that they're planting, Japanese silver grasses, 2 different kinds of sinensis or miscanthus, and they are seed invaders. And I have battled one of them in a meadow at my own home, and it just spreads profusely, and we could do better. And I had the same complaint about the turnaround. There's more silvergrass over there. That's adagio, and it's invasive, and it's just nasty. And it might not, we can substitute something that will be, even if we, there are sterile versions of some of these things. There are less invasive versions. Natives are the best. They won't be as showy, but they'll be a whole lot better for our environment over time. So if you could check the turnaround plantings list for the silvergrass, and also have whoever is responsible rework this plantings list, we would all benefit.
With no objection from the committee, we'll tackle that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Farmer was next. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I will certainly defer to Rob on the plantings. I'm not a planting expert, but I have been over there. I did look at the site. I'm actually very happy that we're talking about saving the tree. I think that, when we're looking at a small thing like this, or the bigger things that we're asking, especially when we're asking about new developments coming to town, and we're asking people to, treat the environment in a certain way and do things the right way. I think that, I'm all for protecting the taxpayer money, so to speak, but I also think that we really need to look at doing these things the right way the first time out of the gate. So if it adds a little bit of money up front to get the composite boards, if that's the right thing to get, so we don't have to pay for it on the backside, I think that that's more of a direction that we might want to look. I think that, certainly with some of our other groups that we're in, we're learning that sometimes the decisions that were made 10 and 15 and 20 years ago are coming back to bite us now. So I would be all for doing these things the right way, whether it's native plants and the right materials and things like that. I get the boulder thing, and I would be totally okay with swapping those out, because I think in the end will look just fine. But it's important that we're doing this stuff right. It's why the city was founded. And if we're asking developers to jump through hoops and other residents to jump through hoops, which are appropriate hoops, in my opinion, to have to jump through, we should do this right the first time and set a good example. So I'm all for moving this thing forward. I think, the residents want to have a pass through there. I think that's important, but we can frame this the right way, and we can, I don't want to save $15 on plants that are going to cost us $45 or $500 down the road. Like it doesn't make any sense to me. So if it costs a little bit of extra money to do it right the first time, I'm all for it.
Thank you, Joe. Councilmember Rambo, you got your hand back up again. Go ahead, Rob.
Yes, I do. Well said, Mr. Farmer, first of all. And Joe, there's a 2450 figure, 2,450 figure, I think, for deadwooding. Hell, I'll deadwood that tree for $2,000. I don't know if DJM has doesn't have an arborist on staff, or maybe not a climbing arborist, but every arborist in America, they come up through the ranks as climbers. That's what they do. And half of the testing is how you climb and so forth. And somebody could shinny up that tree and do the deadwooding. If it's $1,000, that's a reasonable cost to pay for a reputable firm to do it, but not $2,450. And so maybe we can separate that out of the bid and have somebody do it separately, like maybe Davy Tree or somebody like that, because they were renting a spider lift and doing all kinds of stuff that they don't need to do. And I think we can save some money if it's not their forte.
Well, again, with no objection from the committee, I'll pull that from the proposal and then we'll use our standard Omni tree service, which has arborist on staff and the equipment to do it. And they are already under contract with the city.
Awesome.
Great. Any other questions for Joe? Okay, we are still looking for a motion. We have a motion from Mr. Farmer. Do we have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Galani. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the motion passes. Next item under Parks Matters is the final concept plan for the city's town center area. Joe, is Travis taking this?
Yes, Travis has been working with Mr. Gessmeyer from Human Nature, so I'm going to let him do a quick explanation. And he's already let Mr. Gessmeyer in, so welcome to him. And Mr. Newberry, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'll just provide a quick introduction of Ryan Geismer from Human Nature, who has been provided the final draft final master plan of the town center Village Green. And I think Mr. Geismer is ready to present the document to the committee.
Thank you, Travis. And I just wanted to thank the Planning and Parks Committee and the City of Wildwood staff. We do a lot of work with municipalities, and I would certainly rank the City of Wildwood among the more transparent, rigorous, and thoughtful. So I wanted to thank you for engaging me in this process, or engaging this process with me. It's really been an honor to work with you to arrive at the outcome that I'm here to present to you today. So I think we should be proud of the work that we've done together. I know I am. And even though I'm located in Cincinnati now, I grew up in that area, and working on this project has really felt like coming home to my roots. So it's been a kind of a special passion of mine. So, you know, civic spaces like parks and green space are democratic in nature. They're meant to offer a place for everyone with whom we live in community, and should thus serve a diversity of needs and aspirations. And representation can be challenging when diverse perspectives and priorities intersect in the civic realm. I think all of you know that from the role that you serve on this committee and in local governance. So, you know, we value it as a major facet of the creative and community-oriented process for civic design. And the process that we engaged to generate this master plan that I'll share with you in just a moment was really devised to solicit input from a diverse audience of users who would be patrons of this Village Green. And we had over 1,000 responses over 3 public input sessions. So I think we heard a wide range of voices. And the outcome, if we're successful, really balances the needs and aspirations of the respondents who created that place, that beating heart of the community, where people can celebrate community in a setting that's uniquely Wildwood. So if it would please you, I'll walk through the final master plan report and then open it up to questions and feedback. If it's right, I'll share my screen here. Is everybody able to see my screen? Kind of a cover page of the report. Looks like I'm getting nods.
Yep.
So this is the culmination of basically a year of work. It's a documentation of the journey that we've taken from each chapter kind of representing a stage in that journey. And so this report kind of summarizes things up front. It takes us through that awareness phase where we were trying to understand what this place wanted to be, from an assessment of the natural and built conditions, from the needs and desires of the community, and the opportunities to explore different programs. And all of that served as a foundation for some conceptual exploration. So we shared some alternatives. Those alternatives, we solicited feedback to ascertain the strengths and weaknesses that would then be kind of synthesized into what became the preliminary master plan. That preliminary master plan, we reflected back. This is in the vision phase. We got feedback on what people were excited about, what needed refinement and what was missing. And then we use that, as reported in the last meeting, to generate the final master plan, which, if, as I mentioned, if successful, is taking all of these different factors, all of the goals and objectives, the aspirations of the community, and synthesizing that into a cohesive vision that can help propel the project forward. And so what we've been working on since our last meeting was developing an opinion of probable cost and summarizing this document that can then support city staff in helping with the priorities and fundraising and building momentum towards bringing this to fruition. So that kind of gives you an overview of how this is organized as a document of this journey. I'm not sure I need to get into the specifics of each one. This document will be shared, but I can kind of go over kind of the major highlights, in the executive summary. We had each of these chapters supporting the cohesive vision. We had the vision and objectives clearly stated from the beginning that evolved with input from key stakeholders like the committee, like the business community, education community, recreationalists, and then the public over each of these public workshops. We kind of filtered all of that through the professional design team, through our professional lenses, along this process with these touch points, and all the while reporting back to this committee, to the council, for permission to proceed to the next step. And so, what this is meant to be is kind of a, the output of all those kind of checks and balances throughout this phase, making sure that we were headed in the right direction, that the vision was in fact representative of the voices that were breathing into it. And so this then becomes the kind of site plan, highlighting kind of the major components. We have this elliptical civic green, the oval around it, something that can be programmed for as the community living room. This is, as we heard in the through the community feedback, this is the community gathering space, the event space, places where you'll have your barbecue bash for the back to school concert series, summer concerts, evening movies. And we have, a large open green that supports that. We have a multi-use pavilion, kind of a wellness hub, all helping to complete the city hall and community garden campus as a civic campus in the heart of the town center area. We have walking trails amongst the preserved mature trees wherever possible. We have a unique adventure play environment that incorporates water features of different varieties that engage and educate about our kind of natural systems. There's a novel kind of destination observation tower providing panoramic views over the community or over the horizon, with, I'm sure, views to Clayton on a very, very clear day. And then a number of little surprises throughout that as you engage the park, as you explore what the cultural and natural influences and how they converge, offering moments of delight throughout the day, the week, the month, and the season. And so really this is meant to be a place that draws people in, gives them, attracts them, gives them a reason to linger, drives foot traffic to that town center, and really becomes that kind of beating heart of the community. And so many of you remember the path that we took. I'll go through this somewhat quickly, just taking inventory of all of these systems. I'll jump ahead here. We had our visual preference survey that helped to guide feedback on what the character of this would look like, what the programming elements were desired and how then to accommodate those within the park framework, what features, amenities should and could be included. Each step along the way, hundreds of community residents and stakeholders provided their valuable input to help shape the direction as we move forward. As you remember from the conceptual exploration phase, we explored a number of different, parameters to really test out some of the different voices that we heard along the way. So that level of passive versus active, that relationship of the nature to kind of the activity nodes and how that dovetails. Something, you know, bringing the wilds of Wildwood, but also a place where community can gather and celebrate community activities, what the nature of the amenities and features are, and then how does it manifest in form? What's that organizing framework? And so those concepts, you know, help to guide then what ultimately became the preliminary and then master plan that I just shared with you. And so, you know, all of this becomes the tools then to support the next steps of implementation, to help to prioritize a variety of elements that can help support community life in the community living room, and done in a way that's uniquely Wildwood. So bringing that nature in, preserving the trees, celebrating the limestone and the geological formations that are very prevalent as you drive throughout the community, building upon those synergies with the town center area so that this becomes an oasis within a vital kind of economic hub that supports an active residential community, and really thinking about it throughout multiple seasons throughout the year so that it's active throughout. And so, you know, with that, I guess, you know, we have our work cut out for us, right? Moving forward from a balanced approach to providing this village green to breaking ground. And so, let's see, we have much of the content that you've seen. We have, in our opinion, a probable cost. Joe is working with us now to help prioritize kind of a phase one cost estimate that might kind of break this down into small bite-sized pieces that can help build momentum. We've kind of broken it down in a very logical way to kind of understand how then this park kind of manifests as different parts into these projects. And I'm not sure what else I can say other than if there's something that you'd like me to go into detail, I'd be happy to go into detail on any and all of it. You know, my goal in sharing this with you and handing this off to the city staff is to make sure that you have what you need to help, you know, bring all of the goodwill and feedback from the community to life.
Ryan, thank you. And I think I speak for a lot of people. I mean, the design that your company, your team came up with it's stunning. I mean, it really is beautiful. And I guess now the hard work is in front of us. Travis, do you have anything you want to add at this point?
I don't have anything, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there any questions for Ryan? Councilmember Farmer's got his hand up, so Joe, go ahead.
Not so much a question. I was just going to compliment you as Don did. I mean, the plan and the idea, I think, is stunning. I mean, obviously the difficult thing that we need to figure out is that stunning plan comes with a rather large price tag. But I do think that, you know, if we can come up with a concept, obviously I think a great deal of the community really likes this idea of having an area like this. I think if we can utilize it, I thought it was interesting, even looking at the Chesterfield Amphitheater, which is obviously just one town over, you know, they're having concerts there now where they're, you know, charging ticket prices and things, I imagine, to offset some costs. I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's a real community kind of a linchpin. It will get people down into town center where we need them to help support some businesses and things like that. So I'm hopeful that we can keep moving this thing forward. And, you know, the price tag is going to be a big one, but if it looks anything like what the plan is, I think that would be an incredible thing to have in our city for sure.
I agree. Councilmember Rambo, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, real quickly, I'll echo the last two comments. I think it's a great plan. I actually was a big fan of the braided, narrower sidewalk to the north end. It seemed to be less pavement, which is always good for me, but they're attractive. My questions were sort of technical in nature. First of all, and it's kind of after the fact, but what was the rationale behind putting the pavilion near the city hall? Was it, the favorable sun? Was it greater access to the parking? Because it seems like it'll be a little bit noisier for the folks to the west, which are, there are private homes there. And if it were oriented the other way, it might be a little quieter. But the reason I bring it up is either way, that should be the first thing, according to, I think it was Ms. Dodwell last night, which I hadn't realized, we can save quite a bit of money if we don't have to rent a stage any longer. And if we have restrooms there, we can save on porta potties, and we don't spend 13 million on either one of those, but it would help, and it's an incentive to go forward with that. So could you talk just a little bit about the pavilion specifically?
Absolutely. And early in the phase, we explored a number of different locations for that, working with existing topography and the orientation of the crowd to the performance was a consideration. And there's a nice slope from the west to the east where the pavilion is. And so you end up with kind of this natural kind of stadium seating that allows for, views from the back to see over the views from the front to the pavilion. And secondly, it was a point that you identified was having kind of the developed portion closest to other developed portions. So the city hall where there's existing parking and infrastructure, and also not having a major impact on both the topography and the existing trees. And so there's kind of that balancing act with having this function well as a performance venue and dealing with temporal disturbances like in concert noise disturbances and how that might impact the neighbors to the west. And I think ultimately what the team decided was an approach that allowed it to function best could be overcome by potentially some sound attenuation, timing, communication to the residents, and other kind of operational considerations.
Awesome. I love it. I particularly love the convertibility of the ice. You called it the exercise area or something in the wintertime. I think it's going to draw people to town center, and we have our little winter thing that we do and so forth. So it's just great. But my real question is, will you folks help us with the value engineering? Maybe we don't do the ice thing, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Maybe the tower is the last thing. This may be a question for the planning department, but I'm wondering how we can narrow it down and get a phased approach going, because, you've got the pricing for each module, but each module, each item or whatever you wanted to call it, each one could probably be value engineered to shave costs, as we go forward. I guess it's a process question. I don't know if you're the right guy to answer it. Joe or Travis, if you want to jump in on this, feel free.
I'd be happy to answer to the best of my ability, but if Joe and Travis want to supplement or start, I'm happy to defer.
I'm known for confusing questions, so I apologize.
These are important and good questions. First, I want to start with the lob, with the ice skating. We did some diving into that ice skating rink because it's just a fun and cool idea. And we found these tiles that you can basically lay out. They're modular, and they lay out and they allow for, ice skating without having to deal with all of the infrastructure of like refrigerant and drainage and fluid and all of that. And so I think that could be a real fascinating way of making that work, especially dealing with the climate that we deal with here in the near 39th degree north latitude. So in terms of value engineering, our team is certainly capable of bringing projects from vision to completion, and value engineering is often a part of that, and finding the right outcome that aligns, budget with expectations. And so some of what Human Nature will be doing with the planning department is beginning with a phased approach, a meaningful first phase that helps to get the ball rolling, allows it to function as a village green with the necessary components that then, as later developments come online, don't need to be, there won't be a step back. It's not going to be a destructive approach to move forward. And so some of that is the planning work that we'll be supporting moving forward. But that value engineering question is an essential part to aligning budget with expectations. And we are skilled in helping to align the outcome with the original vision, so that even if we're having to substitute materials and make value engineering decisions, that we're still ending up with an outcome that fulfills the spirit of that original vision.
So Joe and Travis, you're not asking for a lot of money as I see it. Were you considering that we would do that in another phase, or is the department going to do some of that, or how is that going to work? I'm kind of looking for what you need tonight.
Well, for tonight, the presentation of the master plan was the intent. Last night, as you know, at City Council meeting, the department presented an amended contract to obtain additional services from Human Nature. The intent of those additional services is the first step, as I would describe it, and that is to sit down with Human Nature and walk through what are the essential items to begin the village green development, then maybe do a little bit of interchanging, and then bring all of that back to the committee saying, here's what we think are the essential items. And some of those will be utilities, things that people won't see, necessarily appreciate, but we can't proceed without. And some will be facilities. And we want to basically kind of test those against you. What do you think? And then each one has a cost, and ultimately we'll come up with a phase one that has a cost estimate, an opinion cost estimate. And that's what we're hoping that Human Nature can help us with. The amount was $4,000, but I still think we have some available caps, so to speak, in our original contract. And so I think, like I say, as we move through there, we'll get to that point. If we need additional services as we work through this first phase, then we'll talk with Human Nature. We'll bring it to the committee, and if the committee supports such, then it goes to City Council.
But the $4 grand we approved last night, you expect that plus years plus to get us to a point where we can begin making those choices then?
That's my goal. And if I'm off base with that, I'd hope Ryan would correct me right now.
That is certainly the intent. And I think you'll find us to be willing partners in moving that conversation along.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And I know Councilmember Galani had his hand up, but then he took it down. So I don't know if he needs his hand up again. Wait, is there any other questions for Brian or for?
Sorry, Don.
That's all right.
One of our air conditioning units in the house is out, and the guy just showed up, so he's he's getting ready to enlighten me on my own proposal over here. So, but I just wanted to say to Ryan, great job on the proposal and everything you put together. It's really, like Councilmember Farmer and Bartoni and everybody else has said, it's a phenomenal job you've done. I'm impressed. And the one thing I was going to say in regards to the question that came up about the ice rink conversion, there is, and I don't know what they're using, but it's a semi-local area down at Lake of the Ozarks in Camdenton at Old Kinderhook Resort. They have a large sand volleyball court area there that they convert in the winter to an ice rink, and they have big Christmas extravaganza and lights, and the kids all go down there and have a great time. So I'm assuming it's some type of similar technology that they're using down there to make that conversion from sand volleyball courts to an ice rink. But it works out really well, and it's open air, and they've got some cool lighting they do and stuff like that. So I think I could envision a little mini winter wonderland around the Christmas holiday season in Town Center, which would be really cool. So that might be some place to look somewhere nearby, that as far as what they did there.
Fantastic suggestion. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so Travis and Joe, I might be a little bit confused. I might have missed something here. So are you looking for some action tonight, or I wasn't at the meeting last night, so we might have already addressed it.
Well, if the committee wouldn't mind making a motion with second and vote to expend $15 million, I'd accept that right now.
13.
13. Well, there's some contingencies.
No to 15, but yes to 13.
Mr. Chair, all kidding aside, the intent tonight was for the presentation of the final
Okay.
document. I think Ryan did a wonderful job of summarizing it. There'll be another presentation of some level at City Council, but there is no action required tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Any other questions for Joe or Ryan before we let Ryan just enjoy his evening like a regular person? Okay, well, Ryan, thank you for your time. And once again, to you and your staff and your company, it's just wonderful work you've done. And thank you from all of us.
Thanks so much. It's great to see you all. Have a great evening.
You too, thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on under Parks Matters, our next two items, if I remember correctly, and Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong, these are more for information only, and we don't necessarily need to do anything unless somebody has a question regarding either one of those. So seeing no questions, I have a couple things that I would just want to ask Joe about before we dismiss, but does anybody have anything else they want to add? Okay, so Joe, two things. One, Lauren had sent something a couple weeks ago about AARP has like parks designated in each state. I'm not necessarily saying we need to like jump on this now, but that, and then Joe Garitano had something, I think he sent you something on like military veterans program that they bring around the Vietnam Wall, if I remember right, like a replica size of it. So I just want to like make sure that we get like, these don't have to be on necessarily our agenda next month, but let's just kind of want to make sure that we just at least get them on the radar and move forward with them.
Actually, I think we can have them on the agenda next month. I just wasn't sure how long the presentation of the Village Green Master Plan would take. So I was kind of cautious on the items I sent over for your consideration, Mr. Chair. But if you don't mind, and there's no objection from the committee members, we'll have those two items as part of our July agenda.
That would be wonderful. So, okay, does anybody else have anything to add? Anything from staff? Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Clark. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you very much. Mr. Cruz, go enjoy your vacation like a normal person does.
Yeah.
And everybody else have a wonderful week. Thank you.
Good job, everybody. Thanks.